Hi, I'm interested in talking about different qualities of relationships. Um, what I have in mind is to clarify three different categories of relationship, and those are relationships for the purpose of shelter, for the purpose of a stepping stone, and for the purpose of a launching pad. Those are the three uh, labels that I just made up prior to starting this recording. So, as we listen, we can consider um, have we had relationships that fit into any of these different categories? What kind of relationship do we currently have? And is there any interest in exploring a different quality of relationship than whatever is currently present or whatever has been present in the past? Um, all of these different kinds of relationships certainly have a certain kind of value, or people wouldn't stay in them or get in them and stay in them. Not just get in them, but stay in them. So there's clearly value to each of these different kinds of relationship, but they're definitely contrasting with each other. And if I were to say from an ideal perspective, what sounds like what ideally you would want to have, would you rather have a launching pad, a stepping stone, or a shelter? Well, for many people, they'd say, well, the launching pad sounds really interesting. I think that that's part of why I picked that term to describe it. Um, so briefly, the shelter idea is that the relationship is a coping mechanism or a strategy to increase safety or to increase security where there's a sense of insecurity or danger. So uh, as long as there's a sense of danger or a lack of confidence, a lack of security of some kind, then the shelter will be appealing. And um, you could even say that shelters are mechanisms for avoiding something. Avoiding social criticism would be one popular variation. So if the shelter is to avoid social criticism, it may be common for people within that mode to condemn the purpose of shelter for a relationship because they might think, well, if somebody's in a relationship primarily for as a transitional shelter, stepping stone also implies transitional. Shelter could be, lasting or very temporary. So if there's a criticism of temporary relationships, especially like romantic relationships that are temporary, that are unstable, or even that are just shelters, they're really aren't based on a bond between the two people so much as a uh, security or shelter that is provided through the relationship itself, a cover. So if there's that background of anxiety, concern about social pressure, social criticism, social condemnation, then people may want to condemn uh, the purpose of shelter, or they may want to condemn relationships that basically are for the purpose of sheltering, for continuing sheltering. So if somebody's been sheltered and then there's an absence of their earlier shelter, they might want to find a new shelter, right? It's to me makes a lot of sense. And by the way, I might have done this myself. Um, uh, so if I want to avoid social criticism, then one thing I might do is condemn other people for doing relationships the wrong way, and that might include condemning people whose relationships seem to be for the purpose of sheltering, for the purpose of avoiding uh, certain problems or whatever challenges the relationship is designed to avoid. It could be entirely for avoiding challenges in general, right? In many cases, it might be a specific thing. For instance, I think of an occasion that I wasn't thinking of myself so much as someone else who was in an abusive setting, and then they just wanted to get away from an abusive setting, an abusive household, and for them to shift to a safer context was a a no-brainer in the sense of course that's if that's all that they perceived as being available to them. Here's tremendous risk, and here's the unknown. Let's go for the unknown from tremendous risk. So for them, fleeing into a possible shelter was could be a driving factor in starting or maintaining a relationship. And of course, over time, there may be like a sequences of shelters. The first shelter, maybe, if we use the analogy of architecture, if the first shelter is made of straw or flimsy construction material, over time, you either have to repair and maintain the shelter or move to a new, create a new shelter. So if a shelter lasts for 5 years or 10 years, wow, that's it's not. From my perspective, there's nothing really remarkable or unusual about relationships for the purpose of shelter. It's like pretty common. It's not necessarily super attractive. It's not something that grandparents necessarily want, or people in our midst may be disappointed if they think, wow, they may be ashamed if they think, here's somebody who's just pursuing a relationship for the purpose of shelter. But that's on them. That's their experience. The basic thing is, for some people, at some times, shelter is what is appealing. And it can be immensely appealing, right? If there's enough anxiety or terror, then a possible shelter can be incredibly appealing. So I wanted to emphasize that point, that people, whether they're in a shelter, a relationship for shelter or not, they might condemn various kinds of relationships. Why is it that one person would condemn other people's relationships? Now, again, in the context of a parent or grandparent condemning or having an opinion about, or even wanting to interfere with a relationship or guide, influence a relationship, we might understand that. But in general, for people to just have an opinion about other people's relationships, if it's not your employee or coworker where you actually want them to have stability, why is it so interesting what other people are doing? It might not really be that interesting, other than someone might want to display that social condemnation. So someone who's in a mode of relationship for shelter, especially a shelter from social criticism, they may be very active in voicing and displaying social criticisms and shaming of other people. And if there's this emphasis on shaming relationships for shelter, that often corresponds with somebody who's deep in a relationship for shelter or is oriented toward relationship for shelter, but doesn't have the social stability to simply acknowledge the value of shelter. So they might say, why would anybody ever want shelter? They shouldn't want that. Well, it's pretty easy really to recognize the value of shelter if one calmly looks at what's going on in an individual case. And for people who have in their own lives been attracted to relationships for shelter, again, either I feel guilt and shame about that and then perhaps condemn other people, or I simply recognize it and think even appreciatively of relationships for the purpose of shelter that I have explored or maintained. And if the other people from those relationships condemned me at some time or condemn me in the future or now, I get shame. I get competing for social approval. I understand the distress that is in the background when somebody is behaving like that. Why do I understand it? Maybe I've done a little of it. Maybe a lot. That's really the question. Have I done a little or a lot? maybe a lot. So I spent a lot of time talking about relationships for the purpose of shelter. Relationships that are a stepping stone, again, you may already kind of get what that means, but there's one particular, it could be one particular purpose that one person has, and it doesn't have to be the same purpose as what the other person has. So two people can view the same relationship as a stepping stone, but in regard to a different outcome. So they're attracted to a specific thing. They want to strengthen the relationship in a way that you might not find in a relationship for shelter. The people don't necessarily have a particular investment in the relationship for shelter. They don't really want the relationship, they just want the shelter. With a relationship that is a stepping stone, they do want the relationship. They will fight for the relationship, they will protect the relationship, they will sacrifice for the relationship in ways that people who are in a relationship for shelter might not do. Again, the more ashamed that somebody is, the more they might fight for something. But you know, if you think of these as a spectrum, I set them up as three categories, but really the idea is there's a spectrum. Within the spectrum, there's intense sheltering where people are super, engaged in the relationship. Then there's kind of the moderate shelter, which isn't so tense. And then upgraded to stepping stone, people want to strengthen the relationship, but within the context of a specific purpose. And it actually is very similar to me to a typical business relationship. When someone has a job, they generally want the job to go well. The job, if they're not the owner of the company, they're just an employee, they want the job to go well. The purpose of their work is to earn money. So it doesn't have to have any kind of dishonesty either in the background. Why does somebody work for a company? To keep the job, because there's a paycheck coming if they keep the job and keep doing the job. They're not doing the job for free, for fun. If it's fun, great. But they're doing it for the paycheck. And likewise, one possible thing that people could target in a romantic relationship when there is a stepping stone aspect would be a stepping stone toward greater financial stability. I see that as, actually, I remember making reference to this many years ago with somebody, kind of saying, this is, if we don't have mutual financial benefit in this relationship, then it might not last. I guess would be the short version. If there's a background of financial instability, that could be a problem in the long run or in the short run. The idea of a stepping stone could be that one or more individuals have a sense of, commitment to a specific purpose other than the relationship, but they're interested in the strength of the relationship. They're actually honest or authentic in a way that somebody in a mode of sheltering might not be. There can be people who are just like straight out, this relationship is for my safety, for sheltering me from whatever I want to avoid, and they might list one or more things. With the stepping stone, there doesn't have to be an explicit, commentary on what is the target. There could be two different targets for two different people if it's a romantic relationship with two people, a couple. So the other detail is, after the relationship, if one or more of the people reach their, kind of their real target, then the relationship has served its purpose and they move on. So this could happen in a number of months, number of years, whatever time frame. We could even think of, relationships as being stepping stones that give us the opportunity to access the creation of a family. That is distinct from the relationship itself. So the relationship between the two people is a distinct thing from the offspring, the creating of a expanding of a family, the reproduction. So that might be what I'll say for now about relationships as stepping stones. There's any number of goals that they can have. It may just be one goal. That's kind of my idea, that it's one goal at most per person. So maybe there's two goals in a stepping stone relationship where one person has one goal, the other person has a different goal. When one or more people meet their goal, then their investment into the relationship is going to decrease. So if somebody has a really big goal and the relationship is a stepping stone toward a goal, and they move toward the goal through the relationship, and then the relationship ends, they still moved toward the goal. They still can have appreciation for the other person, or at least respect for the other person. They might not have a sense of lasting emotional bond or affinity for them. They don't have maybe a sense of loyalty. They're not displaying loyalty because they should, or they might not be. They either have a sense of admiration and loyalty and interest in the other person, goodwill toward them, or not. And if there's goodwill, okay, but the goodwill isn't the purpose of the relationship. The relationship had some other purpose. If they're able in their own life to move towards some other outcome through the relationship, then they can see that as valuable. And then if the relationship ends, yes, certainly they might then seek or be attracted to another relationship that operates in a stepping stone way. Or maybe they've reached a point where they're ready for what I'm going to present as kind of the pinnacle of potential. And I call it launching pad. What does that mean? Well, first of all, launching pad is just a metaphor. It doesn't mean literally that the two people are going together toward the moon, although that might be very romantic. But why do you really want to fly up in a big metal tube into the sky and then come back down? Huh? But launching pad is a metaphor. The idea is that the two people can create a project together, or a series of projects. They're actually engaged as partners in a way that you wouldn't necessarily expect in a relationship for shelter, or a relationship that is a stepping stone for the individuals. They're going to be engaged and interested in communication and collaboration, partnership, feedback, maybe involving other people. They're really interested in effectiveness. You can't maintain secrecy and deception between the people if they're actually in an orientation of team and connection and collaboration. Then there wouldn't be secrecy within that top level of the project. If there are other people involved in the project, obviously they might not be informed of all the details, or maybe there would even be some deception somehow. It doesn't matter in what I'm presenting now. The point would be in the case of a romantic relationship with the two people are working together very closely. Really, they've selected each other out of mutual appeal, mutual interest, mutual attraction. They select each other perhaps for things like what they can provide to the project, including just clarity about what kind of project would be the one to do. Now, we might think that it'd be nice for people to know that going in to their prospecting process, that they already have an idea what kind of project they're interested in, where you want that launching pad to take the team, the crew. But they're looking for crew members, and there's a very different kind of respect and discretion, discipline in selecting crew members. Basically, if it's a two-person crew, it better have a good crewmate there, a good match for you. If you're, to use the metaphor like of a ship or a spacecraft or something, you want that other person to be really skilled communicator, really with a similar commitment and clarity and motivation as far as what the launching pad is for, what the project is for, what the teamwork is targeting. If people don't have an inspiration for that outcome, then there's that's a no-go. I want to find out, do other people have a similar inspiration? I don't want to convince them. I don't want to persuade them. I want to present to them something, and if it resonates for them, great. And if it doesn't, and I keep presenting it to them, I might wonder, why do I keep, um, you know, why? So how about targeting other possible crew members? You know, that would be the analogy. So a high degree of engagement, a high degree of investment, the strength of the project is really important. For the project to last, I use the word project, so again, if you're thinking about a moon mission, you get to the moon, you come back, and then the project's over. Well, isn't that kind of like a stepping stone? Sure, but it could be that the project isn't such a, you know, a 4-day journey or whatever, right? In the case of a romantic relationship, the project might be a very big project, a lasting project, even a lifelong project. So the idea of a lifelong relationship isn't an ideal in a launching pad relationship. The launching pad relationship may require a lifelong commitment, and if there's no spontaneous experience of commitment for a lifelong match, then that's a no-go. That's a yellow light or a red light or whatever. It's not a green light. If the people aren't actually, you know, really oriented lifelong for each other, then it's a no-go. Now, I think to mention some different contexts in which a lifelong project can occur, and the two people don't necessarily have to select each other. It is possible for other people to basically manipulate or arrange for a project in which, you know, two groups mutually select each other and select, you know, candidates and put the two candidates together, and here's the crew, and it's, you know, kind of a big project that really involves more than two people in that case, but it could be ultimately coming down to two people and their interaction with each other. There's nothing all of these comments that I'm making are just setting up basic distinctions and contrasts. There's you know, whatever details we might presume to fit in here. In particular, with a launching pad relationship, there's a consistent skepticism or even interest, respect for presumptions. I want to know what the presumptions are. I want to ongoingly prioritize them and test at least some of them. Measure them. Do I need to update them? Do they match reality? There's not much interest in condemnation. If there's a lot of argumentativeness and condemnation and criticism that, you know, isn't constructive criticism, if there's like condemnation, that's pretty much a sign that somebody's not ready for a launching pad relationship. That's not a fit. So either, you know, they kind of notice that and go, wow, you know what, I'm willing to sacrifice some of my old habits that are useful for other kinds of relationship, and I'm ready to look into a new way of relating. Either they have that orientation or not. Either they have that experience or not. So if we look at these as different ways of relating, there's relating with the purpose of securing shelter and maybe maintaining shelter, the way of relating as a stepping stone, and the way of relating as a launching pad. And of course, you know, I mentioned like romantic relationships. We can have that launching pad orientation all over the place. In business, I can go out and have, you know, casual, vulnerable, straightforward, relaxed conversations with people, very kind of non-committal until I experience a spark, let's say. So until there's a spark and a mutual recognition, there doesn't have to be anything. But with looking at life or looking at launching pad as a way of relating, then yeah, I'm going to have certain kinds of things that I look at as stepping stones. I might have certain things I look at as shelter. I can have all three of these things in my life at a particular time. This is a shelter kind of thing. This is a stepping stone kind of thing. And over here, that's my one launching pad, or here are my three launching pad kind of things. And a launching pad orientation can happen spontaneously. I go out, I talk to people, or I don't go out and somehow I'm interacting with people, online or by phone or whatever it may be. Somehow I'm interacting with people, and we start to have ideas that we're conservative. We're excited and enthusiastic about them, but we're conservative in the sense of wanting to be disciplined as far as sorting them, how realistic are they, and then strategically assessing methods, applying ourselves, and being productive. So there can be a tremendous interest in mutual productivity within the context of a launching pad way of relating. So mutual productivity can be the interest, whether it's a couple, like a romantic, family-oriented interaction, or a business opportunity, or I'm not sure what other categories I'll throw in there. Maybe you're going to someone as a specialist or as a healthcare consultant, and you want them not just to fix one thing, not a shelter thing to, protect me from blah blah blah, not a stepping stone to help me win a athletic competition or whatever. I want to recover from blah 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 fast, or I want to raise my performance up to such and such level. That's a very stepping stone oriented thing, totally fine. But there could also be, hey, I want to have, I'm interested in learning about health and having a massive breakthrough in my health. Well, that's a different kind of relationship. It's a different kind of conversation, different kind of competency. The specialist in healthcare that's attuned towards shelter and stepping stone orientations, like, athletic performance, they probably wouldn't be the right consultant for real breakthroughs. You want to have a massive breakthrough, okay. You want to have overall health. You want to have launching pad as your whole way of relating to life. Well, you can't. Can you do a launching pad lifestyle just in a couple areas? Ultimately, launching pad's kind of like contagious. You're going to have a launching pad orientation to everything. You're going to want health that's in the mode of launching pad. You're going to want to have business and career activities that are in the mode of launching pad. You're going to want to have relationships, family, etc. in the mode of launching pad, where there is a orientation toward, let's find opportunities, let's strengthen our bonds. If we feel attracted to do so, then let's do it really well. Not because we should, not because we're avoiding condemnation or criticism. We just spontaneously want this thing to go well. In that case, relationship or business or whatever it may be, the education of children. Is it just a stepping stone? Is it just shelter? Do we want to protect them from ignorance or poverty or whatever, so they can avoid being a soldier? We want them to do well enough in school so that they can get into ROTC or get into a technical field where they don't have to be infantry. So those are understandable. I was going to say those are intelligent orientations. They are, and we might think of looking at education for oneself or for one's children. We might think of that in a stepping stone mode, or we might think of that in a launching pad mode. So launching pad can be quite contagious in the sense of the good way. It can be resonant, where once I start to have launching pad, it starts to actually have a ripple effect, and everything in my life either transforms into launching pad mode from whatever context and structure is currently there, or those structures and contexts dissolve, and then that makes space for a new setup, a new method, and launching pad starts to spring up all over the place. So it's a blossoming organic thing. So my metaphors as far as stepping stone and launching pad, they may seem kind of technical and technological. Okay. But when we get to launching pad, and once we really get into it, we realize that the super technological metaphor is really for people who aren't in a launching pad, to give them a sense of what that would be. Once you get in it, it's more like gardening and blossoming and going to say pruning, but horticulture. it's it's actually we can think of it as the most relaxed thing. It's very disciplined. It's very conservative, but with this background of calm alertness, not alarm and shame and anxiety and paranoia. It's just, yeah, here's some really inspiring outcomes. Let's find the people and the methods to produce that outcome. It's very direct, honest, pure, innocent, in ways that Relationship for Shelter might not be, because, again, in the case of Relationship for Shelter, it's so common that there'll be deception and anxiety, about being found out, and thus deception, as well as denial, and this, no, that's not why or no, that's not what I meant, and, argumentativeness and antagonism interpersonally between the people, even the people who are in the shelter together. They can have a lot of antagonism toward each other, resentment for each other, and so on. So anyway, there's some different categories. I've kind of put them into a dimension, so that kind of sets up a spectrum. Where within all of that do you see your interest now? So really, what you've done in the past and even what you have currently, I don't know how important that is to you. Certainly it might be. I just don't know. So, it could be useful for you just to be clear on what are you doing now? What's going on for you now? What are you ripe for now? Or what are you currently, where's their momentum for you currently? And the idea of launching pad, basically this whole thing was to set up a contrast where I could tell you about the launching pad way of relating and present it to you so you could go, ooh, I want that. Yeah, that sounds good. So if that's what you're saying to yourself, my mission has been accomplished, and certainly you're welcome to let me know and comment, share, etc. Have a nice launching pad.